1940, North Atlantic, 700 miles west of Ireland. Chief Petty Officer Thomas Harley clung to debris in a lifeboat with 18 other men, freezing, exhausted. German U-boat surfaced 200 meters away. U-99, one of Germany's deadliest submarines, commanded by Otto Kretschmer, the ace who'd sunk 47 Allied ships. Kretschmer's voice crackled across the water through a megaphone. "You will be taken aboard for questioning. Row toward us slowly." Tom knew what that meant. The Germans would take 1 or 2 prisoners, leave the rest to die. Lifeboats in the North Atlantic in November had maybe 48 hours before hypothermia killed everyone. No rescue ships were coming. The convoy was scattered. The Royal Navy had no idea where they were. Tom had survived 6 hours in the water after his ship, Heem's Jervis Bay, was blown apart by a German battleship. He'd watched his captain go down with the ship, watched his crewmates drown in burning oil, and now a U-boat wanted to interrogate them before leaving them to freeze. Tom looked down at the steel pipe wrench in his hand. 16 inches long, 8 pounds, something he'd grabbed from Jervis Bay's engine room before being blown overboard. He'd been using it as a paddle, and he was thinking about something he'd learned during 10 years working in a Newcastle shipyard. Every submarine has a weak spot. You just have to know where to hit it. This was November 1940, the darkest period of the Battle of the Atlantic. Britain was starving. German U-boats were strangling supply lines across the ocean. In 1940 alone, U-boats sank over 400 Allied merchant ships too. 5 million tons of cargo lost. Every convoy that didn't make it to Britain meant less food, less fuel, less ammunition. Convoy AX-84, 37 merchant ships sailing from Halifax to Liverpool, was carrying enough supplies to feed London for 2 weeks. On November 5th, the convoy was attacked by the German pocket battleship Admiral Skier, 11,000 tons, 6 11-inch guns, capable of obliterating any merchant ship with a single salvo. Heem's Jervis Bay, the convoy's only escort, was hopelessly outmatched. An armed merchant cruiser, essentially a converted passenger liner, with a few obsolete guns bolted to the deck. Not a warship. A cargo ship playing dress-up. Captain Edward Fegan ordered Jervis Bay to engage Skier alone to buy time for the convoy to scatter. It was a suicide mission. Jervis Bay lasted 22 minutes before being blown apart. Captain Fegan went down with his ship. Scattered 5 merchant ships were sunk by Skier before nightfall. The rest escaped. Tom Harley survived. He was blown off Jervis Bay's deck when a shell detonated near the engine room. He woke up in the freezing North Atlantic, clinging to wreckage surrounded by burning oil and drowning men. Thomas Harley was born in Newcastle, in a family of shipyard workers. He'd spent 10 years at Swan Hunter Shipyard before the war, specializing in engine maintenance and hull repairs on cargo vessels and destroyers. Tom could diagnose engine problems by sound alone and had encyclopedic knowledge of ship construction rivets, welds, pressure points, structural weak spots. He knew where ships were strong and, more importantly, where they were weak. He'd enlisted in the Royal Navy in 1940 at age 28, older than most recruits, assigned to Heem's Jervis Bay as engine room chief and damage control specialist. He wasn't supposed to be in combat. He was supposed to keep engines running. Tom spent 6 hours in the water before being pulled into a lifeboat by survivors from another sunken merchant ship. 19 men in a lifeboat designed for 12. No radio, no flares, no engine. Just oars, a compass, and faint hope. They rowed west, away from the battle, trying to put distance between themselves and the Skier. At dawn on November 6th, U-99 surfaced. Kretschmer had been shadowing the convoy, waiting for stragglers. He spotted the lifeboat and surfaced to investigate. U-boats sometimes interrogated survivors for intelligence before leaving them adrift or, occasionally, to Allied rescue ships. Kretschmer ordered his deck gun crew to man the 80A Bebiab gun and called out, "Identify yourselves." The men in the lifeboat were terrified. Tom shouted back, "Merchant crew. No weapons." Kretschmer considered this. Then he said, "You will be taken aboard for questioning. Row toward us slowly." Tom knew if they rowed toward the U-boat, some would be captured, the rest would die. If they refused, the U-boat would machine gun the lifeboat. There was no good option, except one. As the lifeboat rowed closer to U-99, Tom noticed something. The U-boat was sitting low in the water, too low. The deck was barely 3 feet above the waterline. The conning tower hatch was open. 3 German sailors stood on deck, watching. The 88 Bemin deck gun was manned but not aimed at them. Tom realized if the U-boat was sitting that low, the ballast tanks were still partially flooded. Boats surface by blowing compressed air into ballast tanks to displace water, increasing buoyancy. But this U-boat hadn't fully surfaced. It was in a neutral buoyancy state, ready to dive quickly if threatened. That meant the hull was under pressure. And if the hull was under pressure, it was vulnerable. Tom knew that submarines, especially U-boats, had external ballast tank vents. These vents allowed water to flow in and out during diving and surfacing. The vents were sealed by simple mechanical valves, located on the outer hull, just above the waterline. If you could open those vents manually, seawater would flood the ballast tanks. The U-boat would lose buoyancy and start sinking. And if it was already neutral buoyancy, it wouldn't take much. Tom's plan: get close enough to reach the hull, open a ballast vent with something heavy enough to break the valve mechanism, and flood the tank. The U-boat would sink before the crew could react. The problem: Tom didn't have a tool, except the 16-inch steel pipe wrench he'd grabbed from Jervis Bay's engine room. 8 pounds. It would have to be enough. U-boat ballast vents were mechanical, not electrical. They were designed to be operated from inside the submarine. But the external valve housings were exposed on the outer hull. If you could physically jam or break the valve mechanism open, water would flood the tank uncontrollably. A U-boat at neutral buoyancy has almost no reserve buoyancy. Flooding even one ballast tank would cause it to list and sink rapidly. The crew would have maybe 2 to 3 minutes to blow all tanks and surface before the boat went under. Tom had once repaired a ballast valve on a British submarine in dry dock. The engineer told him, "These valves are the submarine's Achilles heel. If one gets stuck open during a dive, the boat floods and sinks." Tom whispered to the man next to him, a young merchant sailor named Billy Wright. "When I jump, you row like hell away from the boat. You'll die," Tom said. "We're all dying anyway." The lifeboat pulled alongside U-99's starboard side. Tom could see the ballast vent housings, small, dome-shaped protrusions on the hull, about 18 inches in diameter, above the waterline. A German sailor on the deck shouted, "You, old man, climb up!" He was pointing at Tom. Tom stood, wrench hidden under his coat. He pretended to reach for the deck railing, then dropped to his knees and slammed the wrench into the nearest ballast vent housing. The first blow dented the housing. The second blow cracked it. The third blow sheared off the valve actuator arm. Water started hissing into the tank. Not a flood, but a steady stream. The German sailors didn't understand what was happening for 3 full seconds. Then one shouted, "Saboteur des boot!" A sailor on deck raised his rifle. Billy Wright grabbed an oar and swung it like a bat, hitting the sailor in the knees. The sailor fell. The rifle went off, the bullet ricocheting off the conning tower. Tom moved to the second ballast vent, 5 feet forward. He smashed it open with 2 blows. Water poured in. The U-boat immediately started listing to starboard. Kretschmer in the conning tower realized what was happening and screamed, "Emergency surface!" The diving officer inside opened the compressed air valves. Pressurized air started forcing water out of the ballast tanks, but it was too slow. 2 tanks were flooding faster than the air could expel water. Tom went for a third vent, near the bow. A German sailor grabbed him from behind. Tom spun and hit the sailor in the face with the wrench. The sailor went down. Tom smashed the third vent. The U-boat was now listing 15 degrees to starboard and sinking by the bow. Kretschmer ordered the deck gun crew below. He was preparing to dive. If the U-boat couldn't surface, he'd take it down and try to stabilize it underwater. But the bow was already submerged. Water was pouring over the deck. The U-boat was going down. Tom jumped off the hull back into the lifeboat. Billy and the others were rowing frantically, trying to get clear before the U-boat's suction pulled them under. The bow dipped below the surface. The stern rose into the air. Kretschmer and 6 crew members scrambled out of the conning tower and dove into the water. The rest of the crew, 32 men, were still inside when the U-boat slipped beneath the waves. 8 minutes. From the first wrench blow to the U-boat disappearing. 8 minutes. Tom's left hand was broken from hitting the valve housings, 2 fingers fractured, tendons torn. 1 man in the lifeboat was shot in the shoulder during the chaos. Kretschmer and 5 of his crew were pulled from the water by the lifeboat crew. Kretschmer was in shock, shaking, unable to speak, said in broken English, "You are insane. You sank a U-boat with a wrench." U-99 sunk in 8 minutes. 32 German sailors drowned trapped inside. 7 German survivors pulled from the water, including Kretschmer. 19 British survivors rescued 2 days later by a Canadian destroyer. One of Germany's top boat aces captured. Kretschmer spent the rest of the war in a Canadian POW camp. Tom Harley was awarded the George Medal, a British civilian decoration for gallantry. The Royal Navy wanted to give him the Victoria Cross, but regulations stated the VC could only be awarded for combat actions while serving with a military unit. Tom's lifeboat didn't count. The Admiralty initially classified the incident as secret. They didn't want the Germans to know that ballast vents were a vulnerability. The story was suppressed until 1943, when the British realized the Germans had already redesigned U-boat ballast systems. Otto Kretschmer, during interrogation, confirmed Tom's actions. He said, "I have sunk 47 ships. I have survived depth charges, air attacks, and torpedo malfunctions. I was sunk by a man with a wrench. It is the most humiliating moment of my career." Billy Wright, the merchant sailor who helped Tom, later said, "Tom didn't sink the U-boat because he was brave. He sank it because he was angry. He watched Jervis Bay burn. He watched his mates drown. And when that U-boat surfaced, he decided it was payback time." You can't train sailors to sink submarines with wrenches from lifeboats. It was a once-in-a-lifetime confluence of knowledge, opportunity, and desperation, but it influenced submarine design. After British intelligence debriefed Tom and interrogated Kretschmer, the Admiralty shared the vulnerability report with Allied submarine designers. By 1943, British and American submarines had redesigned ballast vent systems to be internal, no external access points. The Germans did the same with later U-boat models. Tom's wrench attack exposed a design flaw that had existed since World War I. Tom Harley returned to Newcastle after the war and went back to work at Swan Hunter Shipyard. He helped build frigates and destroyers through the 1950s. He never spoke publicly about the U-boat incident. In 1965, BBC journalists tracked him down for a documentary. Tom agreed to one interview. When asked how he felt about sinking U-99, he said, "To be a hero. I sank it so my mates in the lifeboat wouldn't die. That's all." He died in 1978, age 69. The story was classified for 3 years. By the time it was declassified in 1943, the war had moved on. Bigger battles, bigger heroes. Tom's George Medal was awarded in a quiet ceremony in 1941. No press, no publicity. Otto Kretschmer became famous after the war as the U-boat ace who was captured, but his captors rarely mentioned how he was captured. It was embarrassing for everyone involved. Modern submarines have no external ballast controls. All venting and flooding systems are operated from inside the pressure hull, with redundant safety mechanisms. This design standard exists, in part, because of what Tom Harley did in 1940. 8 minutes, a wrench, 3 ballast vents, and one of Germany's top U-boat aces pulled from the water, defeated not by depth charges or torpedoes, but by a Newcastle shipyard worker who knew where submarines were weak. The Royal Navy took Tom's lesson, redesigned their submarines, and built a doctrine around protecting ballast systems for the next 80 years. They gave Tom a medal, classified the story, and filed it away. History remembers Otto Kretschmer as the ace. But it was Tom Harley who proved that even the deadliest weapon has a weak spot if you know where to look and you're angry enough to hit it.